And the Bucs hope that this will be their first victory ever.
We have a great area, growing area, in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Sarasota, Bradenton, Lakeland, and Winnehaven, and even Wachoo. Over 2 million fans, and it's the fastest growing area in the United States.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, live from Tampa Stadium. For the first time ever in a regular season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers enter the stadium with numbers in both the win and loss columns. The Buccaneers came onto the field to a wild standing ovation from the some 60,000-plus fans at Tampa Stadium. They did not introduce any players individually. The PA announcer said, "Ladies and gentlemen, your Tampa Bay Buccaneers."
Welcome to San Diego, California, Super Bowl 37. It is Tampa Bay versus the Oakland Raiders. Third down, 18, dropping Gannon, looking Gannon, throws up in the head, intercepted at the 40, Derek Brooks 30, Brooks to the 25, 20, Derek Brooks all the way, there it is, the dagger's in, we're going to win the Super Bowl.
Tom Brady signing with the Tampa Bay Bucs tomorrow. Holy hell.
Everyone always says, why the Bucs, man? Why do you choose the Bucs? And it was a no-brainer.
Brady has all kinds of time, throws toward the end zone. It is a caught ball. Touchdown, Tampa Bay, Mike Evans. 8 seconds, 7 seconds. Brady to throw, throws a deep pass downfield. Got Scotty Miller in the open, makes the catch. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Super Bowl 55 will be underway at Raymond James Stadium. Here's the snap out of the gun. Play action fake pass to Gronkowski. He's going to score a touchdown. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Holy guacamole. Bucs are the Super Bowl champs. They can't stop the clock. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them. Tampa Bay Buccaneers from the 48-yard line. Second down, 13. Brady lobs one downfield. Caught ball by Gronkowski inside the 20 to the 15-10. Gronkowski to the 5 to the 4-yard line. Holy guacamole. Here's the snap. Pressure coming from the outside. Brady throws it back. Caught ball first out of the 50. Outside the numbers 40 to the 30-yard line. To the 25. And it's Perriman. Bashaud Perriman. Touchdown Tampa Bay. Bucs win in overtime.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are just about 24 hours away from playing their first home playoff game in over a decade. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast on YouTube today for episode 246. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host, Evan Wanish. He doesn't get the special introduction this week. We are also joined by a very special guest to help us preview today's game, Mr. Bucs Nation on YouTube, a.k.a. our good buddy, James Hill. How you doing, James?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. We're back to Buccaneers playoff football, man. It feels pretty darn good, but also it is kind of bittersweet too, because that means we're only potentially a couple of short weeks away here from not having Buccaneers football for another good chunk of time. So hey, let's enjoy this playoff run while it lasts.
It is a little bit of a scary thought when you put it in the sense that, if the Bucs lose this week, they go home and their season is done. And I think there is nothing that we would like less than them being bounced in the first round by the Philadelphia Eagles. So hopefully for not only our sake, but the entire city of Tampa's sake, the Bucs can find a way this weekend to get the job done and keep it moving. But before they can even focus on the next game, they have to focus on this week, because that is the nature of the playoffs. That is what happens if you look ahead. They were looking ahead when they played Washington, another NFC East team, just like this Philadelphia Eagles team, where when they went and played Washington, they were probably looking ahead. And I think that's part of the reason they lost that game. You have no chance to do that in the playoffs, whether you're the defending Super Bowl champions or the first overall draft pick. If you get ahead of yourself in the playoffs, you will lose 10 times out of 10.
Yeah. If you're looking towards the second round already, this Bucks team, one, doesn't deserve to win, and two, won't win. So they got to focus at the task at hand. And it's not like the NHL, it's not like the NBA. This isn't a 7-game series where you can, we lost game one, okay, we can bounce back. No, that's it. So it is do or die right now, and they're going to have to come out with their best effort on Sunday.
Before we dive into this game, I just wanted to recap some quick Bucks headlines from throughout the week. The Bucks are obviously not going into this game shorthanded. We talked about a lot of key guys coming back from injury, but not only that, they have some accolades to their names as well. Along that offensive line, big right tackle Tristan Wirfs was named the first AP All-Pro in team history at the offensive lineman position. So a really great season for Tristan Wirfs. And that guy's just carrying the momentum that he set his rookie year. He actually came out and said that Tom Brady addressed him actually after he found out he won the AP award. And he said, awesome, good for you. Now you set the standard. And luckily for Tristan Wirfs, his mentality about it is exactly what it needs to be. Brian Baldinger was doing one of his film breakdowns, especially the offensive linemen. Those are always fun to watch when you get Baldy looking at some tape. But he always breaks down Tristan Wirfs. He loves doing it. And T. Wirfs' response to that was the hay's never in the barn. And if you guys know what that expression means, it tells you all you need to know about that big offensive tackle from Iowa. That guy has just been kicking ass and taking names. I do have one question about the All-Pro second team, I guess. I had seen it floating around, or I had actually seen it posted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that Tom Brady is a second team All-Pro. Is that that's a thing, right?
It's the second team. Aaron Rodgers was the first team. So essentially Aaron Rodgers won MVP. It's the same voters that vote on this, that vote for MVP. But now it's not official. That wasn't the MVP award, but it's the same exact voters. So that really gives you really a significant look or signal that what's coming. But yeah, technically, I guess he is second team. I'm not really sure if there is second team AP All Pro. Like there's a few other Bucks that got some votes, but no, I don't believe anybody else really made the cut.
The way that ratio of voting was split, by the way, it wasn't necessarily a close race between Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. It was like a ratio of, I think, 34-16, so a little over double the votes.
But it was the closest since Matt Ryan and Tom Brady in 2016. So normally they haven't been that close. So it's a pretty close race for those standards.
Hey, well, thanks for putting it in that context for us. Let's go ahead and dive into this week's opponents. So the Buccaneers do have their hands full this weekend at home. Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles are coming to town. And these teams actually played way back in, God, it feels like it was 2 weeks ago, but way back earlier in the season. I think it was week 6 this matchup took place. And this was in Philly. The Buccaneers victorious in that one 28-22. But one thing that is important to note about that game is that you can obviously go back and watch it, but the Bucs were in control of probably 75% of that game. And then towards the end of the third quarter, early fourth quarter, the Eagles found a way to really get back into it. And it came down to one final offensive possession for Philadelphia. And then at the end, the Bucs had to kind of chew out the clock. I think that was Tom Brady taking the sneak up the middle, and then that was like the game, right? The Bucs very well could have lost that game. But they were able to hold on and win, which is very important. But here these two teams are again. It's the postseason. These are two very, very different football teams from what they were in week 6. For both of these teams, it's important to look at how they did down the stretch of the season. The Bucs lost 2 games in the final stretch of the season there after week 6, and the Eagles only went on to lose 1.
Yeah, they lost obviously the last week to the Cowboys, but the Eagles were playing all their backups, so you can kind of put an asterisk next to that one. That doesn't really, the Eagles didn't have anything to play for. They rested everybody. That loss doesn't really matter, even though the stats will, it will show up in the stats, but like that loss didn't really matter.
Yeah. So let's talk about what the Eagles are going to bring to the table. And I think some of the biggest differences between this team now compared to week 6, quarterback Jalen Hurts said in a press conference this week that they have, quote, revolutionize the Philly offense coming into this week's matchup. With that being said, you look at what the Eagles do well. They come into Tampa with the NFL's best running game, basically averaging 160 yards per game. But over the last 10 weeks of the season, that number has increased to 190 yards per game. The running backs only got 9 carries in the first Eagles and Bucks game. But as we had just said so many times, these are two different teams now. So with Philly running the ball a lot more and a hell of a lot more efficiently, it'll be interesting to see if the Bucs run defense can step up this week. And that's also something we talked about a little bit on the mailbag show this week, Evan.
Yeah, I definitely think that it'll be important. Like you said, these two teams are very different, and the Eagles have been really hot. But they face some not so good competition. We'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, I mean they're a different offense right now. When they played the Bucs, they were really struggling early on in the season, trying to find an identity, and they had a first-year head coach, so it was definitely a different. And the Bucs, like you said, the Bucs are different too. The Bucs haven't been as dominant against the ground as they were in the first half of the season or in past seasons. Right, they haven't been as dominant as these teams are starting to scheme ways to work around that and try to run on them. And I don't think the Eagles will be any different. Now, do I think the Eagles will go out and not throw the ball at all with Jalen Hurts? No, I think they're going to mix some of it in because they still do realize that the weakness of the Bucs is probably their pass coverage. If you get those linebackers having to drop back and cover the pass. But I do think that you're going to see a lot of outside runs from Philly. You're going to see a lot of zone reads from Philly. And I don't really think they're going to change from their game plan that's been working over the past 8 games or so, and what has gotten them to this point right now. So I don't really think you're going to see much of a change there, but it'll be interesting to see how the Bucs, assuming they're relatively healthy, on the defensive side, how the Bucs also attack it, because if they get Levante David back this week, that was somebody they didn't have in week 6 when these teams last played.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. You guys both made this a point. Back in week 6, that was kind of the start, right, of the Bucs run defense being, struggling a little bit, right, throughout this year. That I think that Eagles game was really the first game where you started to see the cracks form in this run defense. But like Evan said, you didn't have, a really big piece to that run defense like Levante David. So if he is available, if he is playing, that's going to obviously add another dynamic. You're also going to have Shaq Barrett, JPP there as well, which, both those guys being out could also be reasons as to why the Bucs run defense has been struggling here towards the, second half of the season. So there's definitely going to be a lot of moving parts. It's going to be an interesting thing to pay attention to. Best case for the Bucs is if they can somehow stop that rushing juggernaut and try and force Jalen Hurts to pass the ball, much like what they did there back in week 6. Hurts didn't have the best game passing, so if they are able to make him pass the ball, that'll certainly help out their chances, I think.
Yeah, we've heard from Todd Bowles before, one of the major tools of this Bucs defense is the ability to make teams one-dimensional. If you can force a guy like Jalen Hurts to throw the ball more than 30 times a game, maybe some mistakes are going to happen and the Bucs can take advantage. You look at some games this season where they had to do that. Carson Wentz against Indy, right? Looked like the Bucs were going to lose that game until Carson Wentz had to start throwing the ball. Like that's where a defensive approach like that can pay off after some time. But we talk about the run game and defending it for Philly. Not only has the run game kind of become a main facet for this Philly offense, but it allows them to beat the Bucs another way than just tearing up their defense. It keeps Tom Brady off of the field. And I think that's going to be, exactly what the Birds are going to want to do this weekend, because we've spent a lot of time over the last 2 weeks here talking about how Tom Brady is a potential MVP candidate right now. In my opinion, I think in all 3 of our opinions, he should probably win it, but we know that's likely not going to be the case. That's okay. He feeds off of that bulletin board material anyways. But the Eagles also know that too, right? They know that they don't want Tom Brady out there throwing the ball 40 to 50 times, because even though this wide receiver room is shorthanded, Tom Brady has won with less, and he's going to find the guy who's open. It doesn't matter who. He could be throwing to a fan they just pulled out of the stands. As long as he's open and has a little bit of cushion, he's probably going to make that catch, right? So the Eagles know that, and keeping Tom Brady off of the field is exactly what they want to do. As far as the weather update goes, the last time we talked to you on Wednesday, looked like it was going to be rain. Evan, do you have the latest on this week's Cannon Fire Weather Watch?
Yeah. So even though we are doing the weather watch, the the weather has been overblown for this game a little bit
Well,
at this point.
the weather's always over. How many times did I tell you on Wednesday?
No,
like weather
I mean,
guys
I'm
down
saying,
here are wrong all the time.
I'm not saying by the meteorologists. I'm saying by like fans. Like fans are wondering if they're gonna postpone the game or if they're gonna like it's not gonna be like what are we talking
people
about?
Make you think that they're about to play in like a Category 2 hurricane.
Yeah, like that's what I'm talking about. Like it's just like it's getting a little bit ridiculous. So there is supposed to be not so great weather, but the good news is that it seems like the rain is actually going to come earlier. So it seems like the rain won't be raining as much during the actual game. It'll be earlier in the day. The field will probably be slick. It'll probably be a little bit wet. The only thing is, though, that those winds are still expected to be there during the game. I believe it's 10 to 20 miles an hour winds. So that's the only cause for concern there. It seems like the rain is going to be moving out quicker than expected. So I don't know if that's going to really play much of a factor during the game, but the winds are still going to be there and it'll still be a little bit chilly, mid to low 60s, I believe. So yeah, it'll be a factor, I think, for a team that throws the ball. To me, rain is rain, right? It's just it's water at the end of the day. Like players have dealt with it, but wind is what really affects when you pass the ball, right? Because wind can affect the throw. Like it can literally affect where you're throwing the football. And I think as a team that like Tampa, who is going to want to throw the ball, versus a team like Philly who's going to want to run the ball, the conditions still favor Philly, even though the conditions won't be as bad as originally thought.
Before we talk about the run game for Tampa Bay, of course, the return of Leonard Fournette, wanted to talk about the return of some other starters along that defensive line. JPP and Shaq Barrett are expected to be back in the lineup this week, and I just wanted to ask you really quickly, Evan, how do you think this defensive line shapes up against Philly? I know they met earlier this season, but I don't exactly remember them getting to Jalen Hurts a ton in that game. But yeah, how do you think this defensive line stacks up against Philly for round 2 in the playoffs?
Well, it's tough because Philly's strength has been up front as well. Philly's offensive line has been really good. They've been consistently good over the past, 5 or 6 seasons, really. And it also doesn't make it easier when you have a quarterback that is able to escape pressure. Jalen Hurts is not just going to stand back there and be a statue in the pocket. He's going to be able to move around and he's going to avoid a lot. And that's what they did when these two teams last played. When the Bucs got pressure, Jalen Hurts was able to escape it. And that's why the Bucs, if they had a sack, it wasn't many. I'm not sure if they even had a sack. But like I said, Jalen Hurts is able to escape that. So to me, it's going to be important to not only get pressure, but also it's going to be where the pressure comes from. Because if you lose contain, Hurts is a guy that can easily beat you with his legs. And you can't let that happen on a consistent basis. So got to get home. But it's going to be a challenge to get home because this is literally, I think, probably the Eagles' best unit on their entire team is the offensive line, I think. So it'll be definitely interesting to see. But having Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul back will definitely help that, even though both guys probably won't be a 100%. They should be better and an improvement over what you've seen the past few weeks, which hasn't been bad, but it hasn't been great.
Well, looking back at that Week 6 matchup, the Bucs had 2 sacks in that game on defense. You want to take a guess at who was involved?
Cam Gill and Shaq Barrett.
Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul, the 2 guys returning this week. JPP finished with a half sack with Vita Vea that game, and Shaq Barrett had one all to himself. So it wasn't an overly productive day for Tampa Bay, but the guys who were able to get it done are going to be returning this weekend, which is more good news for that Bucs defensive line. James, your thoughts on some of the matchups this week?
Yeah, like Evan said, the Eagles do have a pretty darn good offensive line. So, it's going to be tough. This is going to be a tough game. I came into this playoff, situation for the Bucs thinking, there really isn't going to be an easy game here. Like all the teams that are in the playoffs for the NFC are all pretty darn good teams. The Eagles are no exception. They match up very interestingly against the Bucs, right? In a lot of different ways. So it's going to be up to guys like Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul, to really try and apply and get that pressure. Thankfully you have guys like Anthony Nelson who were able to come in, when they were out and really generate some good pressure, get a couple of sacks of their own. So it's going to be nice to have people like that in your rotation. Joe Tryon's going to be there as well. But I still think it's going to be a difficult matchup for the Buccaneers, front seven against this Eagles offensive line. So you're really going to have to hope that, guys like Shaq Barrett, JPP, they come back and, they're able to play well in their returns, right? Also having Vita Vea there, he just signed a massive extension. We've talked about this time and time again. Hopefully that'll help create some opportunities for some of those guys one-on-one as well, because, they're going to need those opportunities with this Eagles offensive line.
Yeah, and if there's one guy that I got to pick on that defensive line that I will be paying the most attention to this week, it's going to be JPP. One, we have talked about just kind of the absence that has been felt along that defensive line. I know he wasn't playing 100% this season, and that was definitely felt as well. But one of the big things I noticed this week, not only is he returning from injury after not playing for multiple games, but the way he's talking, man, I know he has always talked a big game. Like, he talked a big game early in the season when he was hurt and not really doing anything. But he's telling everybody to get ready for a new JPP. They're showing some footage from practice, and he's waving his arms up in the air over his head, which is kind of a big deal if you have a torn rotator cuff. So I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table this week. He is, as we mentioned on the mailbag, 8-0 in career playoff games. So hopefully that streak can continue this weekend. But if he hopes for it to continue, it's going to have to start with him stepping up and being the pass rusher that the Bucs signed him to be, because we've seen him do it before in Tampa Bay. He has had double-digit sack seasons here in Tampa Bay. He almost had double-digit sack seasons off of a broken freaking neck. I mean, JPP is basically the Kurt Angle of that defensive line. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I mean, he's going to be dealing with a lot of pain. Just because he got rest, the torn rotator cuff, it's still going to be there. Bruce Arians even acknowledged that. He says, he acknowledged that he thinks the rest helped him, but he's still going to have to play through that. So I'm not sure how much production you're going to see. I don't know. To me, Jason Pierre-Paul hasn't looked like the same player all season. I know it's partly injuries, but I don't know how much of a change you're going to see. I think as far as pass rushing goes, I think in the run game, he will help as far as run defense and setting the edge and stuff. But as far as being a dynamic pass rusher, I'm not sure how much you're going to see. I think that's going to have to come from guys like Shaq Barrett and maybe even Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's good to have him out there, especially as a leader, right? As a guy who can bring more energy to that defense and can hopefully give them a boost when they need it. If the Eagles, if they have a scoring drive and the defense is starting to maybe get down on themselves, TVP can hopefully, bring them back up and make them start playing again, because this is do or die right now. And he understands that, right? He's 8-0 in playoff games, but he hasn't had much playoff experience, but at the same time he has, because he's played an 8-0. We talked about just how spoiled he is, really. I mean, making the playoffs twice and winning the Super Bowl both times. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, he's got enough experience. He knows what it takes to win these types of games. And I think he's going to go out there and try his best to do it.
Yeah, and then also it helps that you have a guy like Anthony Nelson, too, who, can rotate in case you need him to, right? I think that's huge to have a guy like that, kind of emerge this season, right, for the Buccaneers defense while JPP was getting that rest. And, like you said, Evan, it helps, right? Any little bit helps at this point, right? Because I'm sure if JPP was still playing, and didn't get that rest, forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, his effectiveness would have probably plummeted, So now that he's gotten, I don't remember how many weeks he was out for, but I know he did get a good amount of rest, I think, which I think will, can only do good things, right? Keep him as fresh as humanly possible. Like you said, though, these guys aren't going to be playing at 100%. Nobody is at this point in the year anyway, but, especially in the case of JPP dealing with the injuries he's dealt with this year, which it seems like every year he has situations like that, and he still always kind of pushes through and puts up some decent numbers. So your fingers crossed he can do it again, right? But again, it still is nice to have a guy like Anthony Nelson in your back pocket, and Joe Tryon as well. in case you need them in this playoff matchup.
So Jason Pierre-Paul's last game was December 19th. So he hasn't played in almost a month. So that was, he's gotten significant rest. So hopefully we see a sort of, like I said, the torn rotator cuff ain't going away, but hopefully you see a re-energized player there that can make an impact.
100%. Let's take a look at the other side of the football now. One of the biggest storylines for the Bucs this week isn't Tom Brady potentially winning MVP. It is the return of playoff Lenny, the man himself. When the Bucs played the Eagles in Week 6, Lenny ran the ball 22 times, 81 yards. He also got himself a pair of touchdowns, which was nice. But it's also important to note just how much better the Eagles' run defense has gotten since that game. I know the Cowboys just dropped a 50-burger on Philly, and it's important to remember that they were playing most of their backups on defense. I think the Cowboys put up like 170-plus yards on them in that game. It was quite the clinic on the ground. But they have gotten much better. I mean, believe it or not, they finished the season as a top 10 run defense in the NFL. They only average about 108 yards per game, and they are 6th best in yards per carry, holding teams to right around 4 yards per carry. Lenny finished with 3.7 the last time these two teams played. So which one's going to give this week? That's what it's going to come down to. The Bucs are going to get playoff Lenny back, and obviously if you want to get him back in shape, he's going to have to get the reps. So he might not be 100% at the start of the game, but of course they hope over the course of the game he can start to get warmed up the more carries they give him. But you're also short Ronald Jones this week, so that's important to mention as well. As far as this run game versus the Eagles' run defense, what are you thinking, James? Do you think playoff Lenny can suit back up and be the guy that the Bucs signed him to be last offseason, or what are we thinking here?
I mean, hey, it's kind of, well, not exactly the same thing that happened last year when playoff Lenny was born, right? But Ronald Jones is out for the round 1 playoff matchup. Oh, here's Leonard Fournette getting back in the mix, so maybe we'll see a repeat of that situation, but it's huge for this offense. Absolutely huge, right? Leonard Fournette is one of the most active pieces in this Buccaneers, probably the most active skill player in this Buccaneers offense in terms of total touches per game. So whenever you look at Leonard Fournette here versus this Philadelphia Eagles defense, as a runner, hopefully he can have similar success to what he had all the way back in Week 6, 2 touchdowns. That was awesome. But I'm also going to be looking at him in the passing game. I think that is going to be very huge for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense and how efficient they're going to be able to be in this game because, there's not a lot of options left. Fournette's going to be getting even more targets probably thrown his way now. And, that's huge, right? Because Brady really does rely on and trust Leonard Fournette in this passing game. So I think that's going to be just as big of an aspect, if not a bigger aspect to Leonard Fournette's game here versus the Philadelphia Eagles is what he's able to do in the passing game. I think, Rhett, you talked about this at the beginning of the podcast here where, the Bucs haven't been as dominant. Part of that could have been because of the fact that Fournette wasn't out there, these past couple of games to end off the year. So, I'm going to be interested to see how efficient they're going to be able to be, especially in their passing game now that they have one of their top passing targets back.
Yeah, Keyshawn Vaughn, Le'Veon Bell, / Ronald Jones, they filled in fine, right? They did their jobs. But I think it's clear that this season the best running back far and away the best running back on this roster has been Leonard Fournette, and it'll be a huge boost to get him back. I'm not sure exactly if he's only going to be on a snap count or what. I don't know, right? I don't know with any of those players, whether it's Shaq Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, if Levante David plays, Leonard Fournette. We don't know about snap counts or anything like that. But assuming he plays a good bit of the game, I do think you could see Tom Brady target him an awful lot in the passing game, which he already was. But like I said, I think I explained this on the Wednesday show. My fear is that Leonard Fournette just had a fantastic season of catching the ball after he was a non-factor last year. My fear is that he sat for a few games, the rust gets to him, and now all of a sudden he goes back to 2020 regular season where he just can't catch a cold. That's my only fear, but that's just an internal thing with me. But I do think that having him out there will be beneficial. Like you said, the Eagles' run defense is not the same. They were actually one of the worst in the league when these teams last played. Like they were bad, and the Bucs exploited that. But this time it's different. Not really sure if they changed much up in their scheme. I just think it's the players just playing better, right? I think it's the Eagles' defense just playing a lot better. So, yeah, I think it'll be more of a challenge. But I still think that if the Bucs want to have success, if they're going to win this game, you can't have Tom Brady throwing the ball 50 times, especially not with the wind. The rain. Like, I'm not saying have him throw it 10 times, but if the Bucs have Tom Brady throwing the ball 50 times, I think that means the Bucs are probably losing for most of the game, because that's just not a recipe for success, especially in the playoffs. That's just not something that's going to work consistently. And having Fournette out there should hopefully help that.
You spoke to the fear or this uneasy feeling that you have about Leonard Fournette potentially catching the football again. Let me offer a remedy here. I know that you're probably not the only person who feels that way. I can tell you there's probably quite a few people who are wondering in the back of their mind, man, I hope Lenny can just kind of pick up where he left off this week, because, yeah, it is quite a difference how well he has caught the ball in 2021 as opposed to the regular season of 2020.
And his entire career, too. Like, he's never been that guy.
Well, let's say, God forbid, that ring rust is there, right? He's able to run the ball, get a couple of yards per carry, do what you got to do, set up second and third, manageable. Like, that's what your running back should do most of the day. He's able to do that. He's not able to catch anything out of the backfield. How do you feel about Le'Veon Bell stepping up, man? We talked a little bit about him this week on Wednesday. Le'Veon Bell not necessarily going to be getting the most carries, but he has kind of taken that role as the third down back. We saw a little bit more of him when Keyshawn Vaughn was out there, Ronald Jones. But I know he's been limited, but I really like what I have seen from Le'Veon Bell catching the ball. I'd say, like, out of all of our, quote, pass-catching backs, it probably looks the most natural with number 6. And hopefully if the Bucs have to start throwing the ball to running backs this week, not only is Le'Veon Bell pretty good at picking up a block, he's pretty good at running a route every now and again. So I'd like to see him get involved in the offensive game plan this week if Leonard Fournette cannot be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, we're also, you're assuming Giovanni Bernard can't return, which we're not really sure if he can or not. But, I mean, Le'Veon Bell's earned it. He's a very natural pass catcher. He's done it before. He has a lot of experience doing it. You can tell. I think, most impressive to me has been his pass blocking. I think Le'Veon Bell has been a tremendous pass blocker, and that's something that they've been looking for out of their running backs. So I do think you might see him for a few snaps here and there, especially if Fournette kind of, even if he can, but, like, he hasn't played in a few weeks, right? He's coming off an injury. Do you want to play him for 30, 40 snaps, right? Like, do you want to play him for that much? So, I do think you might see a little bit of Le'Veon Bell and maybe even Keyshawn Vaughn. If Gia Bernard can't go and they're limited to kind of 3 running backs there, I do think you could see, all 3 of those guys contribute in some way.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility there with Bell. Maybe they'll use him kind of how they were using, Giovanni Bernard at the beginning of the season, right? In 2-minute situations, and kind of in like, again, those similar situations that they were using Giovanni Bernard, right? And we saw that a little bit here the past couple of weeks to end out the year where Bell was in on those 2-minute drills. Bell was in kind of those clutch situations as the receiving back. Will he keep a similar role? It's tough to say because they do love giving Leonard Fournette every opportunity whenever he is healthy and available. So we will wait and see. But like you said, Rhett, if Fournette does kind of struggle a little bit right out of the gate, maybe they'll consider, incorporating, a guy like Bell more into the passing attack.
And talking about this Buccaneers passing attack, let's focus on the quarterback, Tom Brady. Believe it or not, we haven't talked a lot about him this week. And that's probably because of the weather conditions we've been prefacing this entire episode with. But let's get into this potential passing attack for the Bucs. I think the biggest key this week, whether it's raining, whether it's windy or not, it could be sunny and 65 degrees at 1 o'clock for all I care. I think creativity in the offensive play calling is really going to have to start to show from Byron Leftwich. This is usually the time of the year where every offensive coordinator who is still playing in the league is going to bring something special out of their bag. But Byron's got to do that this week. And if the weather doesn't allow Tom Brady to rip it and grip it 25 yards down the field to a wide open Rob Gronkowski, you're going to have to work to adjust that throughout the game. And I think I was actually talking to a guy up at the local barbecue spot next to my house the other day. I was decked out in my Bucks creamsicle stuff. He looks over, he says, "How about them Bucks, baby?" And we had ourselves a red and pewter conversation, but he said it himself. He's like, "Look, dude," he said, "if Byron cannot, find a way to get creative on offense, or at least just effectively move the ball, you look at what's worked for guys in the past, Tom Brady in particular. I don't think Byron Leftwich should be afraid of a little dink and dunk offense this week, if that's what it comes down to. I mean, it won Brady a couple of rings in the past with less receivers. Wouldn't it be great if he actually won chicken wings from winning all those Super Bowls?
That'd be great.
Yeah, won him a couple of wings in the past. But Tom Brady has won a couple of championships with a dink and dunk offense and, some janitor playing at receiver. So I just think the creativity on offense really needs to come through this week, and I'm looking for Byron to deliver something like that.
I mean, I don't understand the narrative there. That's what they've been doing. Well, that's what they've been doing. Like the Saints game was really, to me, the last time they forcefully fed the ball down the field. Like, that is the last time. Like, seriously. And even before then, the Bills game, fine for the most part. The Falcons game, definitely fine. The first two drives of the Falcons game in Atlanta, they were just dinking and dunking all the way down the field. To me, it really changed after that Washington game. And that's when a lot of teams, Washington started playing a lot of cover two and starting to put a lot in front of them and not letting you go behind them. And that's what the Bucs have adjusted to. So, yes, has it been exactly 100% pretty and effective? No, because it's still Bruce Arians' offense, and believe it or not, Tom Brady doesn't just want to throw the ball 5 yards and then get to the next play. He wants to push the ball down the field too. The issue, this Eagles defense does not allow that. It's not going to happen. The one time the Bucs tried it in Philly, it was intercepted. Now, it was a miscommunication. Brady looked for AB, and I guess AB must have ran something wrong or something, and it was intercepted by the safety. But that was a deep ball. That was the one, the deep ball that, they were looking for. And Philly does not allow that. They're one of the teams that just, they strictly try to keep everything in front of them. So defensive coordinator for the Eagles, Jonathan Gannon, he's going to, he's going to let Brady sit back there and take the check down. It's going to be up to Brady. He has to be patient. You have to be patient in this game. If you're looking for the big kill shot every single play, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. It's gonna be turned over or it's gonna be incomplete, and you're gonna end up punting. It's not gonna work. So you said, he might not be able to. The weather might not let him grip it and rip it 25 yards down the field to Gronkowski. The Eagles won't let that. That's just not what they do. That's not what their defense is predicated on, not allowing big plays. But what they do allow is the short 7-8 yards. So what Brady's going to have to do is be patient, and these wide receivers are going to have to be patient as well, sitting in a lot of them zones. The Eagles rarely play man. They just don't do it a ton. So they're going to be playing a lot of zone, and Brady's got to see it and recognize it. And you're right, though. I mean, the offensive play calling does have to be creative. It does. I thought the game plan overall last week was fine. They got off to a little bit of a slow start. They had 3 plays in the first quarter. The Panthers controlled the whole clock, which, like we talked about earlier, that's what the Eagles are going to try to do, right? The Eagles are going to try to replicate that exact first quarter from the Panthers last week. The exact thing. Keep Brady off the field and let the Bucs have 3 or 4 plays on offense, and that's it. So, I think it's an interesting matchup because Philly takes away what the Bucs want to do, but the Bucs have also shown the willingness to be patient. It's just now, I think it's up to Brady to, he has to be patient, and maybe there's a shot there every now and then, but it's not going to be there consistently. And I think he realizes that.
And it kind of goes back right to Fournette being available. Heck, Gronk's available. Rob Gronkowski was not in the last time the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played the Philadelphia. That's huge, in my opinion.
Well, and OJ Howard, the fill-in tight end, had his best game, this season against Philly. So maybe Gronkowski has a lot of success there too.
Right. So I think that having those two guys is so huge, so important to this Tampa Bay Buccaneers passing attack and what they're going to do.
I think, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll let you finish here in a second. But I do agree here. I think if anything on this offense can be an X factor any given week, it's going to be Rob Gronkowski. Because, listen, the chemistry between Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, it's on a different level. It doesn't matter how the offense is playing that week. It doesn't matter how the game plan is, working or not working against a given defense that week. If Tom Brady sees something specific on the defense before the snap and he lets Gronk know, 9 times out of 10, those guys are going to be able to make it work. And I mean, again, it's just one of those things where it's always so unpredictable because not only is Rob Gronkowski this monster of a human being at tight end that whatever linebacker or DB is going to be on him is going to have to make sure, he focuses on keeping this guy covered. So that in itself is enough of a chore. But on top of all of that, just the unpredictability of whenever Tom Brady's going to be looking his way, because it could literally, there's literally times, I'm sure, throughout the season where the only people in the stadium or on the field who knew that Gronk was going to be getting the ball was Tom Brady and Gronk. So it's it's definitely something to get excited about as we talk about, not just what the Bucs need to do well, but what they can do well. And when you have a guy like Tom Brady at quarterback, stuff like that is stuff that he can do well and has been doing well for a very, very long time in the NFL. Sorry to cut you off, James.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, no, but like you said, man, it's a reason to get excited. You talked about kind of dinking and dunking. Rob Gronkowski's kind of that safety blanket type player, right? Where you can throw it to him 5 yards down the field, and he's just so stinking big and strong. He can take 3 or 4 guys with him, and fight for those first downs. Fournette can do similar things. So again, I know it's funny memes, haha, Brady always throws to Gronk, he always throws to Fournette, but that's going to be huge in this game, I think. Fournette obviously was there last time these two teams played. Gronk wasn't, so it's going to add another interesting element that we have not seen yet, when these two teams have played each other. So I think it's going to be huge. Going back to Byron Leftwich with his play creativity, we saw a little bit of that to end off the regular season, right? A couple of Scotty Miller end arounds, I don't know if they've got anything crazy in their back pockets where, they're throwing it back to Tyler Johnson or Brashad Perriman, and then they're going to throw a 40-yard bomb. Somehow Tom Brady gets behind the defense, I don't know if they've got anything like that in their back pocket, but of course,
they're gonna roll out the Tampa special this week.
Right. And obviously, the Tom Brady has a history here with the Eagles. That goes without, being said for the most part. But, obviously, everybody expects Byron Leftwich to be, creative with his play calling. And he has a lot of reasons to be. I tell you, one team that's going to be looking at this, how Byron Leftwich calls this game is going to be a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's right now, I think it's being reported that Leftwich is the betting favorite, I think, to get that kind of job. So, it's to Leftwich's own benefit, too, if he had a little bit of spice into his game plan, and kind of throw some interesting things out there and proves that he can be versatile in his play calling and throw some things out there that are, different from what the narrative may be around Byron Leftwich as an OC. So, there's definitely a lot of good reasons for Leftwich here to throw out some different stuff than what we've seen.
Yeah. All reports are that he's the favorite in Jacksonville. It sounds like the Jaguars want him. That sounds like that's what's going to happen. But it's not confirmed, but it's just, the current rumors that it sounds like that's what's going to happen, unless maybe the Bucs go on next, a Super Bowl run and maybe Jacksonville gets impatient. Who knows? But anyways, we got to talk about the elephant in the room here before we get to the game predictions and everything. And that's the wide receiver room, right? Because obviously last time these teams played, they didn't have Gronkowski, but they had Mike Evans, they had Chris Godwin, and they had Antonio Brown. They had all 3 of them. And now they won't have 2 out of the 3. So it's going to be an adjustment. There's going to have to be an adjustment there. And guys like Tyler Johnson, Brashad Perriman, they're going to have to step up. Even a guy like Cyril Grayson, not available now. So you're going to have to find ways to get the ball in guys like Brashad Perriman's hands in space. Find ways to get the ball in Mike Evans' hands. You can do that, right? You can scheme Mike Evans open. It's not just like Mike Evans can just run go routes and 50-50 balls. You can scheme him to get him open a little bit. There are ways to do that. I look at, especially with Gronkowski too, that when Gronkowski needed that one catch to reach his incentive, that was a schemed play. They schemed Gronkowski open on that play to get him 5-6 yards, just to get him a catch. Do that consistently. Obviously, you can't do it every single time. Defenses will sniff it out, but do that every now and then to get some yards. Make it more manageable situations for you, and it's going to be important. Obviously, they recently signed John Brown to their practice squad. I wouldn't expect him to play. I'd be surprised if he played. If they advance, maybe you see John Brown if Surreal Grayson can't go or something. But I think one of these guys, either Brashad Perryman or Tyler Johnson, it can't just be Mike Evans, right? It can't just be him in the wide receiver room. Even like Scotty Miller, somebody's got to step up, I think. And it'll be interesting to see who that guy may be.
I have, oh man, this is scary territory because the last time I had a bold prediction when James was on the show, everything went wrong. But I do have a bold prediction this week, and I think Brashad Perryman is that guy who steps up. If there's anything that gives me that feeling, it was that circus sideline catch that he made against the Panthers in the final week of the regular season. I think this guy's about to be on one. Like, I don't think he's going to go out there and get 200 yards in the first half on one, but I think he can step up and be that guy. We talked a lot about how he was that guy, or he was forced into the role of being that guy for the Bucs in late 2019, and he went out there and thrived. I really thought he played like a number one wide receiver at the tail end of 2019. Now, it's been a little over 2 years. Hard to believe it's been almost 3 years since 2019 at this point. But, time has passed. I don't know if he'll be as electric as he was during that time in the season, but I do think he can step it up. He has showed us the speed. He has showed us the pass-catching ability. Like, I don't doubt that he can go and get it if he has to, but he's just going to have to make sure he's on his P's and Q's this week. And I think if he is, he's going to be getting a lot of targets.
I like Brashad Perriman, of course. I like Tyler Johnson and those guys' ability to step up. But, again, like Evan said earlier in the show, the wind's going to play a big factor into that. Some of these guys, it's going to be a lot tougher for them already in a tough situation, right? For them having to step up in such a, clutch type of situation here in a playoff game, and you factor in the wind into that, it's going to be, a difficult situation there for them to deal with. But, like you said, Rhett, love Brashad Perriman. He does have a chance to, really get going here if some stuff does fall, favorably towards him. But we'll just have to wait and see, But again, I do love Brashad Perriman, do love Tyler Johnson and their ability to step up. Hopefully they can do that here in this game.
Let's go ahead and start to wrap things up this week with the weekly checklist and, of course, some score predictions after that. So basically, every single week here on the show, we do something called the weekly checklist for the game preview. Basically what it is, 3 things the Bucs are going to need to do if they want to come out victorious this week against the Philadelphia Eagles in their first home playoff game in a very long time. It's kind of daunting, right? It's a little bit of an uneasy feeling because this could be our final weekly checklist of the season, and we don't even know it. It's one of those things where it feels like you've been doing this every single week for so many weeks, and then boom, if they lose, all of a sudden it's over. But I hate to spoil my score prediction here. I don't think the Bucs lose this week. But let's get into the checklist really quickly. Evan, what have you got, my friend?
Yeah, so number one, I'm going to say just keep it clean. That means keep Tom Brady clean. Keep him upright, right? Don't let the Philly defensive line, which also has been good. They have a lot of talented players on that line. Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Josh Sweat, who's questionable in going into the game. He didn't practice all week, but was listed as questionable. Just keep him clean. If Philly can get consistent pressure, it could be a long day for the Bucs offense. So I trust the Bucs offensive line. It's been so good. I think they need to just you need to play a clean game here, and I do think that if they are going to do that, they could have a lot of success because if you can't pressure Brady, that's tough to do as a defense to guard a lot of those guys. And Brady's, like you said earlier, Rhett, way earlier, Brady's going to find the open man if given time, right? The way to beat Brady, and really any quarterback. I hate when they say, well, the way to beat Brady is just hit him. That's any quarterback. You hit any quarterback and they're going to be rattled. So, I think it's going to be important to keep that pocket clean. Number 2 is going to be the linebackers. The linebackers have to help out in run defense. They haven't done enough. One of the big reasons why the Bucs run defense hasn't been as good is because Devin White and Levante David / Kevin Minter have not been doing a good enough job. They really haven't. Devin White especially needs to step up. I know it's been a big storyline this whole year, but more specifically the last few weeks that Lavonte David hasn't played. Devin White's played awful football, really. There's no way to sugarcoat it. So he's got to step up. And number 3, because the weather is what it is, I'm just gonna say make your kicks. It's a weird weather game. With the wind, the ground will probably be a little bit slick. We saw Ryan Suckup slip last week. Luckily, he's okay. But yeah, just make your kicks. Don't go, have opportunities to score points and can't cash in. Suckup did not miss a kick last postseason. He's going to need to do it again.
Yeah, James, did you have anything you wanted to add to the checklist?
Nothing that I can really think of, man. I mean, this is going to be, there's no second chances here, man. If you lose, you're out. So you really got to leave it all out there on the field. This is the type of game where, we've seen not a ton this year, but we've still seen it where at times, this team, oh man, can't believe they did that. That killed this drive, a flag or just a mistake or something along those lines. No room for error, man. There really isn't. So, I mean, just, like what Evan was saying, just kind of play as much of a clean football as you can play, and that applies to the fundamentals, right? You got to be sure on your tackling. You've got to be sure on not getting penalties. Otherwise, that could be the difference here between you advancing to the next round of the playoffs or you going home. Your season is over. That's it. No chance at a second Super Bowl there. So that's kind of a big thing for me is, tackling, basic fundamentals. You got to be on this because there's no other opportunities here to redeem yourself after that. If you mess up, you're done.
Yeah, well, if there is anybody who knows what's at stake, I definitely feel like it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. There was a reporter that asked Tom Brady this week. He said, listen, people have always said that when the playoffs come around, Tom Brady takes it to another level. Now, he's going to deny something like that, but we all know that when the playoffs come around, Tom Brady takes it to another level, and hopefully he's able to do that with the rest of this Buccaneers roster as well. Those guys know what the deal is. You win or you go home. Let's get to some final score predictions. I will toss mine out there first. Honestly, the final score, I kind of have it playing out very similar to the way it did last time these teams met. Not necessarily the game, just the final score. I do have the Buccaneers coming out on top. I do have them scoring over 30 points at home, which has been quite the hot topic this season. They were only unable to do it one time. So I think the Bucs are going to win this game. And I've got them winning this game 31-24. I know 31 sounds like a lot of points, but I think the run game gets going. And if it's not the run game, I think it's, Tom Brady throwing a designed route to a running back 5 yards out in the red zone, and he's able to pad his stats, get a couple of touchdowns on the day. But I do think the Buccaneers put up 31 points, and I do think it'll be close for the most part. I think there's going to be a couple of plays that really separate this one, whether it's a turnover by the Buccaneers defense, right? They're able to go out there and put Tom Brady in a good situation, or it's the other way around. Maybe Leonard Fournette fumbles the ball. It's just plays like that are really going to go a long way in determining this game because there is not going to be that much room for error. So I think whatever team plays the cleanest game at the end of the day is going to come out on top. So I've got the Bucs 31-24. Evan, what is your prediction?
I'm going to toss it to James.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So I think this is actually going to be a low scoring brawl. Man, I really do. I think the Bucs will win. It's not going to be easy. Again, I said this earlier. None of these teams in the NFC are an easy win, right? Point blank, simple as that. I'm going to say 21-17 is going to be the final score. I think that this is, again, the wind playing a big factor. It's going to be wet out there. It's going to be rainy. Yeah, I know players deal with that, but still, it's still a factor. So I think that is going to affect, what these teams do. Of course, the Buccaneers are going to be expecting the Eagles to run it. So, and the Buccaneers will probably want to try and run it themselves. So again, I think this is going to be a low scoring kind of brawl of an affair that, has the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just barely getting out of this one with a win.
Weeks 9 to 17. I'm not counting week 18 because they were playing the backup. Sorry, I'm not counting that. Weeks 9 to 17, the Eagles were 6-2 in that stretch. Okay. That's one of the best in football. During that stretch, they played, they've beaten one team that was now over 500. That's the New Orleans Saints. Okay. They beat them 40-29. The Chargers were the other team that had a above 500 record, and the Eagles lost to them. Okay. 27-24. So the Eagles have beaten the Broncos, the Saints. The Saints were, I believe, they were dealing with a lot of injuries and stuff at that point. I don't remember who was there, but starting quarterback was Trevor Siemian. Okay, which I know the Bucs lost to Trevor Siemian, but still, the Jets, the Washington Football Team, the Giants, and again the Washington Football Team. The quarterbacks that the Eagles defense has faced since week 10: Teddy Bridgewater, Trevor Siemian, Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, Garrett Gilbert, Jake Fromm, Taylor Heineke, and Dak Prescott. It was against the backups, whatever. The Eagles, the fact is, yes, they've earned their way in, right? They have earned their way in. However, they have done it by taking advantage of a pretty easy schedule. And I understand, we've talked about that when teams say, well, Tampa hasn't played anybody. You play who you play, right? No, there's nothing. That's not the Eagles' fault, right? That's not their problem that they're playing these teams. The Eagles, while they're playing these bad teams, they have been notorious for slow starts recently. Greg Allman had a tweet that I found really interesting. The Bucs he acknowledged this, and I was going to say this as well. The Bucs have had some slow starts on offense recently. They haven't really been starting as fast as normal. A lot of that has to do with the guys being out, right? I think Philadelphia, though, Greg Allman says, has been outscored 32-7 in the first quarter of their last 4 games, and they've given up 100 first quarter points. That is the second most in the NFL. First is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who hold the first overall pick. So the Eagles have not been a first quarter team. So I think the Bucs got to jump on them. I do think the weather plays a factor. I think the wind, the rain, I don't care, right? The rain is rain. I said it earlier. But the wind will play a factor. I do agree with James. It's going to be a dogfight. I think it's going to be a brawl. I think it's going to go down to the end. But I think the Bucs just have too much talent, and I don't see Tom Brady losing this game. I think the Bucs are going to win 23-20. I do think it'll be a tough game. I really do. People that are expecting, a 17, 20-point win, you're going to be really disappointed. I think if you're expecting the Bucs to just come out and dominate in this game, because I don't see it. With the Eagles, their offensive line and their defensive line being so good, I think it's going to keep them in the game just enough. But I think Tom Brady, who are you going to trust more, Tom Brady or Jalen Hurts? And I trust Tom Brady in these situations more. So I do think the Bucs squeak out with a win and advance to the next round. So all is well. It's closer than some would like, but I do think that while the Bucs, if the Bucs were completely healthy, if both these teams were at 100% health, and the Bucs, let's say they had Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, all them guys, they had everybody, I think the Bucs would win by 2 scores. But they're not healthy, right? Even if Levante David plays, he's not going to be at 100%. So I do think that's going to play a factor. I think it's a close game, but the Bucs win. So after a long-winded thing, I had to put out some stats there. But after a long-winded thing, the Eagles haven't played many good quarterbacks. And when they have played good quarterbacks, those quarterbacks have tore them apart. So the Eagles played the Bucs and Tom Brady. They played the Raiders and Derek Carr. They played Patrick Mahomes. They played Dak Prescott. They lost all those teams. So every time they've played a really good quarterback, they've really lost. So I don't know if this week is going to be the first week they beat a good quarterback.
All right, let's give my hand, folks. Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, the Philly Bucs fan. Hey, I'm proud of you. I know that was a tough prediction for you. I don't know about the rest of our podcast audience, but I was sitting on pins and needles all week long because I truly did not know who you were going to pick. And I'm glad you didn't stick to your homer ways and take the birds, because I know you really wanted to this week.
Yeah, tough decision. I really wrestled with it back and forth, right?
Yeah, I don't. If I remember correctly, I didn't even introduce you as the Philly Bucs fan this week.
No, you did not.
Yeah.
With all that buildup, I thought you were going to pick the Eagles to win. I was the look on Rhett's face.
With the first half of that buildup, I really did not know who he was going to pick because I do appreciate the stats. I appreciate the in-depth analysis, the breakdown. the quarterback matchups. That's why he's on the show, right? That's why he's the face of the franchise, the heel of the program. But we're happy to have him. But yeah, that took some guts. So I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I know it hurt you. I know it hurt you a lot.
If the Bucs are going to beat any team, like I just, I don't like. I'd prefer they beat this team just so people around me can shut up. So like, I think it's not.
I think it's a perfect way to cap things off. It's a little bit of just a dose of reality. I mean, not only for just the Bucs, but for the Eagles as well. Let's face it. They are Philly. They are in the playoffs, so they deserve our respect as a mutual playoff opponent. But they got here the way that they got here. There's nothing they can do about it. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Firstly, thank you so much to James for joining us here on the show. Thanks for waking up early, buddy. It's always good to have you on here in the daylight hours.
I know. Usually I'm a vampire. Usually I don't make videos until like 3 a.m. at night. So thanks for having me on. Greatly appreciated. And yeah, man, ready for some Bucs playoff football tomorrow.
Absolutely, man. Thanks to everybody checking us out over on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Plenty of great Buccaneers content every single day, including the podcast a few times a week. You can follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show and, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Rhett, HETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. That's the show, folks. Thanks once again for tuning in. We truly do appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you Sunday after the game. Win, lose, or draw. Hopefully, it'll be good news for Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish, and our special guest, James Hill. We'll talk to you guys Sunday after the game. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.